because the people is what makes Imperial Valley, and it's a unique population where everyone knows everyone. I mean, you can't go into a store and not know someone. It's like, it's not an easy run in and run out.
City life is very different from small town life, but there is something incredibly moving about small town life, because there are families that I grew up around that I still have a lot of love for, families that I've known since I was a kid, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. I mean, there are some family names that our families have known for over 100 years. So there's something really to be said about that. I mean, I don't know some of my neighbors here in Los Angeles. So, I mean, that speaks a lot, you know.
The family ties that I have here, the friendships that I've gained over the years, and the people. I mean, they're friendly people. They're jovial. We have a good time, and it's just everybody knows everybody.
That's the one thing I have to give to Imperial County. I lived in San Diego for about 6 years, close to 6 years, and I really enjoyed my time out there. I can't say anything negative about it because, hello, it's San Diego. It's beautiful weather. It's got amenities in every corner. It's not one of those situations where, like, what do you want to eat today? There's nothing to eat. No such thing. You have so much going on all around you. But it's such a fast-paced lifestyle. So you don't really keep to know too many people because everybody's on the go. Here in Imperial County, you know your neighbor. It's either family or it's somebody you grew up with. It's home. It's roots. It's tradition. We're predominantly a Hispanic community, and traditions are strong here. So family takes care of family, and you don't need to be blood to be family. And everybody wants to root for each other. We all want to uplift one another, and that's what I love about Imperial County, especially here in Calipat. I feel like Calipat really shows some strong community love for a small little town. We try our hardest to make sure we include everyone.
I'm very proud of the Imperial Valley. I'm so glad that I was able to get a degree in creative writing. I love writing about the Valley in both fiction and nonfiction. Clearly, I had a good childhood in that regard, that I can look back on these photos and value every ancestor, whether I thought they were a lunatic or not, just because their stories were so fascinating. And it's really the American experience, the experience of coming and achieving that American dream, whatever it is. My family's always believed in it, so I'm just very proud to say that I'm a Calexican.
Oh yeah, I love Imperial Valley, but not because of its attributes. We have pretty poor issues. I think more is the people and the traditions that we have grown and love to do, and I love being part of a community and seeing people engaged.
As I came to live to a bigger apartment complex, so there was a lot more kids to play with. I made a lot of friends right away. Some of the friends that I made where I live, in the apartments where I live, are still my friends now. So, and I still talk to a couple of my friends from Almonte, but I feel that just that community, because it was like 100 apartments, so it was like a big family for me. A lot of the parents work, but we kind of took care of each other around there. So I think that was it wasn't that bad because of that, that family feeling of being in that apartment complex.
Having come from Los Angeles and moving to a rural area, for one, was a real eye-opener. I didn't have the opportunity to see fields and beautiful skies and beautiful sunsets, living in LA, because just of all the hustle and bustle and the buildings and the pollution, etc. And so I think if, one of the things I do miss is just the beauty of the fields and the beautiful sunsets.
It's very peaceful. It really is. And the reason I say that is because I'm comparing it to where I live now. Anywhere I live now, there's a lot of people. Even some of the great parks that are around here, and I mean just the regular city parks, where people go with their dogs and throw a frisbee around, that sort of thing. I think it's because I was raised there, and like I mentioned before, I learned to appreciate it. I think there's great peace and quiet around there. And especially as you get closer to the Salton Sea, the sunsets are beautiful. I mean, mean, I've been there many times. I've gone kayaking, I've gone fishing, I've gone hiking. And I think it's just this, and plus I'm sort of a loner at heart. So I like the solitude, I like the quiet, and you're definitely gonna find it there.
So it's always a shame to watch something that you love sort of wither away, because with that go the memories of what it was and what it really could have been and could have stayed as and sustained itself. But that is the problem of government, and I think we as citizens sometimes need to understand the consequences, you know, of these little shortcuts and these things that we've done over many years to make our lives more convenient, you know.
My son has chronic to severe asthma. I think most absences at his school are due because of his asthma. I mean, a simple, slight little cold will trigger and jump into full-blown asthma, and you feel like a new mom all over again. You know, for those that are moms, you feel like a new mom all over again. It's every 2 hours. Instead of preparing a bottle, you're preparing a nebulizing treatment. Every time the breeze comes, I know, you know, it's gonna trigger his asthma.
This has been a challenge, you know, for the city for years. We have a lot of kids with asthma in this area. If you come down the hill on days where it's hot and muggy, you'll just see a blanket of dust where we live. And so those are the things that our children, that our adults are all breathing in.
I myself personally have asthma, and this is the region that has the highest asthma hospitalization rates in the state of California, right here. And so it's especially concerning. We already have tough air quality as it is. Just naturally, the desert area, also the pollution from Mexico, just a few minutes south of the border here, but also as the Salton Sea shrinks and starts to dry up, dozens and dozens of square miles of this exposed lake bed is being exposed. That dust is being kicked up into the air. It's highly particulate and highly emissive, and that's only going to worsen an already bad situation.
I mean, it's living in a bubble in Imperial County, so the pollution is trapped, you know, and until the big industrial companies from across the border, you know, really start doing their job, Imperial County is going to be getting the brunt of it, and it's going to be really difficult, you know, to break that.
The pollution from Mexico, you know, our standards are very different from Mexico's, or vice versa. And so if you're living in Calexico and all that, obviously there's no filter. It's just the sky, you know, whatever comes from Mexico will drift onto Imperial Valley in regards to emissions, pollutants. And so I think that's a huge contributing factor, but also the dust as the Salton Sea dries further or recedes further and exposes all that playa, and that'll only get worse.
There are days where, you know, we get notifications that today's not a good day to be outside, and we put flags on all the schools. There's a color system, and there's also the burning. There's a field burning down, you know, this is the time of year where we're growing the crops, and sometimes in the cooler weather they burn the fields to get it ready for the next batch of crops. And so there are days in the valley that are no burn days, where they can't burn anything because of the level of intoxicants or whatever is in the air that can affect the lungs of the inhabitants.
And is there any cooperation or coordination with Mexicali to have the same thing there?
They have been working, and you know, it's hard because two different governmental systems, and it's been difficult. But there have been talks, But really, when I was on the council, I know that the GSA, which is the General Services Administration, would get together with other agencies, and they would measure the water and gauge it on how polluted it was. And so sometimes they say, well, this passes our threshold of pollutants, but it's still polluted. So it's really hard to for us as people that aren't in that have that engineering background to really fathom what is going on.
So I am concerned, being a person that has lived here most of my life, that has invested my kids' childhood here, and had plans to stay here. But if things kind of start going into the direction where we're not going to see any positive change, then maybe we got to consider uprooting. I'm not happy about it, but again, quality of life is everything.
This area, one of the school board members, Mr. Ciro Calderon, lives here, and he was noticing that there was neighbors of his that were getting cancer. And so, it's hard to pinpoint where it comes from, but the one thing that was in common was they lived in this area, they grew up in this area, or they've lived here for the last 20, 30 years.
I did a study of the neighborhood here in Indian River, horrible. What happened? So those people, by Nosotros Park, yeah, a lot of them have passed away. Illnesses that are not known to be common. Their air conditioner condenser corrupted and corroded within 3 times faster than a normal air conditioner. Breathing.
What diseases did they have?
Incredible amounts of. This one guy had mushrooms growing inside. He had the closest house to the river. And he passed away. He had mushrooms growing inside his lungs. Yeah, and the doctor said that's in your river. But we can't prove it, he said, but that's what it has to be. That was his only explanation.
I'm an observer of things, and since my son's now 13, since my son started kindergarten here in Calipatria when he was 6, he's a little bit older when he started kinder. Since that year, they would always get sent home a packet for respiratory. Yes, and it's all questions related to asthma. My background is I was a paramedic for 10 years before I was an advocate for my son. So right away, I'm like, hey, all of these questions are all related to asthma. It's like, hey, do you take asthma? Or do you use this inhaler, that inhaler, or do you use this? What type of this? And every year we get these packages, and there's always an incentive to it. Like, they're like, you do this, you get a cool little baggie of stuff. It's like, right on. So I always did it because I'm big on studies. Numbers don't lie. And clearly they want to know how our kids are doing being surrounded in an environment that has a lot of agriculture and the Salton Sea, and so close to the border. So we have 3 issues around here that play a huge role on our air quality. So I always participated. I participate in any study that means for the greater good, right? And I want answers because I'm no dummy. I know what's going on, and I've seen it. I've seen it with the studies that are being conducted, but I've seen it in my own health and friends that have pretty bad asthma just getting worse and worse as the years go by. So yeah, it's raised a little question mark, like what's going on. Since then I'm very, very much so aware of our surroundings.
We have air monitors throughout the county, and it tells you red flag, yellow flag, it tells you the quality of the air. So when it's a poor health flag, most people respect it. And the schools also announce that they have the flags out. Yeah, so we have our days where you're just not going to be outside. Yeah. And part of it is we're next to unregulated metropolis, Mexicali. So pollution doesn't stop at the border, even if the people do, right? The pollution comes. So that's right now, when we get to New Year's, Christmas and New Year's is going to be one of the worst air quality times of our valley. You would think the summer, but it's this time because people are lighting up fires, and over there they burn tires, fireworks, incredible amount of fireworks, and wood, but treated wood, it releases other chemicals, instead of like treat wood, right? But treated wood, old wood they throw up, and then we have our desert areas are packed with off-roaders. So you got all that together, and it's horrible during this time. It'll be pretty bad.
You see this breeze, it feels good right now, right? This breeze comes with the territory of really bad air quality. It comes in and it's pushing all of the pesticides, all that growing. You have what's going on at the Salton Sea with all that dry air. or the dried up soot or whatever it is. But yeah, it all gets pushed. Same, we have cattle that's right here, and it just starts pushing that stuff this way, and then you have the air quality that comes in from Mexicali. So my daughter, she's had a really rough about week and a half with hers, where I know right away she's like, Mom, I have a headache, and I'm like, okay, I gotta start her on her allergy pills. We start off with that, and I got all three of them allergy pills for about a week and a half, and I'm very aggressive when it comes to it. But to her, she actually had to have a couple breathing treatments this past week, and I know it's going to lead to like full-blown asthma, you know, and it's not genetics for me, by the way. Genetically, we don't have asthma in my family, not paternally, not maternally. This is clearly just, I mean, I'm no doctor, I'm no scientist, but it's a pretty Captain Obvious if you ask me. It is a product of our surroundings. And it's tough because I really like Imperial County, but it comes down to quality of life. Do I really want my kids to have to grow up and depend on medications to physically feel good? Because it's a lousy feeling when you feel like that. And there's been times where I have to take a hit of inhaler because my allergies gets really bad. Like right now, I kind of have this little itchy throat, and it's because when it gets like this, I'm gonna have a rough day with allergies. Because again, it's not just asthma, it triggers allergies really bad as well. And some of these allergies are starting to prolong into a more serious diagnosis, like eventually asthma.
It's not a city problem. This is a federal problem. You know, it's international. And I know that in looking back at the history, you know, 14 presidential administrations have had this on their plate, going back to FDR. So, and really nothing has moved forward on this and how we can combat the pollutants and the contaminants, the carcinogens, all that's flowing in that river.
All the runoff that's come through the new river that starts off in Mexico, comes through the Imperial Valley, and then dumps into the Salton Sea. So that feeds the Salton Sea on one hand and keeps it somewhat full. On the other hand, that's a lot of pollution, chemical waste, industrial waste, other toxic material, sewage that comes from the Mexicali Valley and then ultimately ends up here in Imperial County in the Salton Sea.
Behind us is the river bottom, you know, the new river which flows from Mexicali up northward. And when I was on the council the first term, we got to go to Washington, D.C. and we lobbied for some of these environmental impacts. We met with the Army Corps of Engineers, we met with the Department of Transportation, we met with the Environmental Agency, a lot of the agencies, because what we're looking at is not just environment, it's also infrastructure, it's also transportation.
In 2003, there was the largest ag to urban water transfer in the history of the country that happened here, sending water to San Diego, Los Angeles, and the Coachella Valley. And the effects have been felt economically by the reduced amount of business, but also especially environmentally at the Salton Sea, where it's the single largest lake in the Colorado River Basin, fed by the runoff, and it's an endorheic lake. All the waters in the surrounding region flow into it. It doesn't flow out into the ocean, so it's dependent upon the water. And so with less water in the Imperial Valley, that means less water in the Salton Sea. The consequences over these last almost 20 years of water transfers have been a shrinking Salton Sea and the associated health consequences with worse air quality from the dust, and then also reduced habitat for birds on the Pacific Flyway.
The Salton Sea begins to recede, and because it's receiving less and less water, since 2003, by the way, it becomes saltier. The Salton Sea has become saltier. And so there's been a fear that as the other fish have died out, the corvina, the sargo, the croaker, the tilapia are going to reach that point in which they may be able to breed, but the young will not survive. And so the population is going to be on a drastic decline and a dangerous decline, because really that fish is really the only one that the pelicans would feed on. But from what I've read, from what I've seen, as the water recedes, becomes saltier, possibly less fish, and less birds that will be there because they're basically feeding mostly on fish, along with other critters. Of course, there's a few other invertebrates that thrive in the Salton Sea. But For people, as it gets dustier, because there's more of that playa that's exposed, all that wind, whichever direction it blows, it'll blow into the first towns of Calipatria, Nyland, Brawley, as it blows south. Or if it blows north, then it'll hit Palm Springs, Palm Desert, La Quinta, so on and so forth. So there's dangers for both, obviously, as the water recedes.
This is locals who are having to deal with an international problem, and so you have the state who certainly is interested in protecting health and all the rest of it, but it's a unique problem. And so there's been some attempts on the part of the state government to help facilitate the encasement of the new river in Calexico, meaning physically like covering up the river, but that doesn't fix the main problem, which is you have these horribly polluted waters coming in from another country into our backyard, cover it up for a certain amount of reach, but that doesn't do anything other than just cover up an existing problem.
Including pesticides that are no longer used in the U.S. They're banned. They still use them in Mexico though. DDT and DDE, which are cancer-causing, chromosome-changing chemicals known. So we don't even have those, which all float into the Salton Sea. That's another issue. As it recedes, all of that will be blown into our land as well.
I want to emphasize it's not a Calexico problem. It's a USA-Mexico problem, because that water travels all over to the Salton Sea, and that is another big issue. If that dries up, then all that dust is just going to be, and that's another big problem for the county.
I used to actually be on the Citizens Advisory Committee for the International Boundary Water Commission, which takes care of water throughout the whole U.S.-Mexico border. It's just a Citizens Advisory Committee, but I was on it, and in my time that I was on the commission, that's when NAFTA had first started. This was in the 90s. There was a NAFTA fund to do border projects. One of them was water and air quality. So the U.S. invested in 2 water treatment plants in Mexicali, called Mexicali 1 and Mexicali 2. It was cheaper to build water plants in Mexicali than on this side of the border. Instead of building it right on the New River, which they should have done, right? $25 million each. But what happened was Mexicali grows so unregulated. It did help the water quality for a while. Now the population has exploded so much and unregulated, they still have open doors. They just open their sewer doors and it's not treated, and it goes straight into the New River and into the U.S. And industrial waste, obviously. We have huge maquiladoras. It's an international meeting place for businesses that use cheap Mexican labor and then import it to the U.S. And they have unregulated, unlike the U.S. environmental laws that flows into the New River.
Some parts have gotten a little bit better. At the same time, things have gotten much worse. So just last September or so, there was another huge pulse flow of sewage that was released in the Mexicali Valley and then dumped into the New River and, of course, our backyards here in the Imperial Valley, and then ultimately into the Salton Sea. Now there's been federal investment in infrastructure in Mexico to clean this problem up, but ultimately it has not been maintained and it's not been a big priority down there, and unfortunately we're the downstream people and we're subject to all these problems.
You see the river flowing with foam on it, and and it's just on the surface it's going through, and yet you see people from Mexicali or Mexico or Central America trying to come across and floating in that river, and it's just they don't realize what they're getting into.
People in Imperial County, they say don't go into the New River, period. Just don't touch the water, don't go fishing, don't do any of that.
Even the Border Patrol acknowledges, the federal government acknowledges how toxic it is, that they tell their, and if you go in there on your own, then you're not going to be covered.
Really? Wow, even if it's in the course of your work.
So they tell them there's a no follow into the New River.
Water, definitely there is something with it, because I know that many men in the valley have had kidney stone issues as well. Yeah, so I think the combination of pesticides, of water, of the air quality, I think definitely it affects people by all means. And I think the biggest, scariest thing is the fact that Salton Sea, without it, what it will eventually do to everybody else. Not only the Imperial Valley and the Coachella Valley, but Los Angeles as well.
We need federal investment in the United States for water treatment in the U.S. much as like is being done in San Diego and the Tijuana River. We have to have it in the United States. Mexico is a great partner on a lot of things, especially on the Colorado River. But when it comes to these wastewater issues, it's simply not a priority, and we need to prioritize our communities who are in the United States and ensure that all the waters of the Imperial Valley are meeting the Clean Water Act, most particularly at the
beginnings of the border, or the lack of border, were fascinating, because a lot of the things that we're so aware of now in terms of having this imaginary line, back then it was just a different deal altogether, because it was the sort of the continuum of a manifest destiny, and really providing more agriculture for more people who wanted to push west and, you know, create something.
We are part of one community with a fence separating us. The familial ties, not only with Calexico, but El Centro and Heber and Brawley and Imperial and Hopeville, all those cities have family in Mexicali. And on Sundays is the big day where they get to see each other. And you see Sundays, the line to come back is 3 hours long. All of the communities in the Imperial Valley have ties to Mexicali, a city of 1 million people.
I have wonderful memories growing up and entering a completely different cultural environment, because Calexico at the time, you know, and it still is to a certain degree, was very Americanized, and, you know, Mexicali was the capital of Baja, and there was so much to it, so many wonderful restaurants, and there's always something going on, and the population side was much bigger, so getting to go across wasn't a big deal. It was pretty easy to do, and I grew up in my teens going to clubs and getting home like at 3 in the morning, no big deal. Now it just feels like, with all the added security post 9/11, and also the beginnings of that really was during the time that Enrique Camarena was killed. Border wait times got longer, they were searching for him. That's when we started to see a shift, but it was really, I think, 9/11 that changed everything. By that point I had moved away, but in my time going to visit, getting across the border now is a far more complicated process, you know, if you need a sentry pass. If you don't have a sentry pass, you're kind of screwed, and you might as well like walk across. That's just my take on it, as someone that doesn't live there anymore. So I had a great childhood of being able to traverse between two cultures, and also see how these two cultures came together, and enjoy both, you know. So I appreciate having that experience. It doesn't seem to me like that is the case as much, or if it is the case, it's a lot more complicated.
We have people that come to Calexico every day, and then afterward they go back to Mexicali, and some of them might rent like an apartment here or a studio. And for the people like in El Centro, most of the people that live there, you know, pretty much live there. They don't commute to Mexicali and or to the valley back and forth. I think that's the biggest difference that I've noticed about Calexico, is that, you know, our population is essentially, they come back and forth. They're not. They might have a home address here because, you know, sometimes they'll need to spend the night here because of, you know, the kids going to school, or they have to wake up early for work, and they don't want to make the line crossing the border.
Calexico itself, which was right on the border, and 2nd Street, which used to be the main street, used to be like the main thoroughfare of commercial retail, and now it's not. Now it's almost like a ghost town, and I think it's just also the advancement of the idea of everything being monetized, you know, as a corporation, with your Walmarts and your Targets and your, you know, your bigger conglomerates. That's kind of moved away from that 2nd Street area, which used to have tons of retail shops. As I grew up as a kid, I have fond memories of buying my school supplies on 2nd Street, going to eat on 2nd Street, buying clothing on 2nd, like that is gone. And it's just a lot of flea markets, or small little like 5 and dimes, but there's places to give plasma.
Right, a bunch of those.
Yeah, cell phone. So it's just not the same. And I think that has a lot to do with the way the United States is sort of operated in terms of their immigration policy and in terms of corporations coming in like the big Walmarts of the world, these superstores, changing the landscape and making it very hard for smaller operations to be able to make a buck.
In 2008, they were going to appropriate funds for that port of entry, but they stopped it, and so we had to wait. And so right now, if you notice, that port of entry is not done. But then we were writing letters. We were meeting with Congressman Juan Vargas and trying to get that money earmarked for it. And of course, it's hundreds of millions of dollars to get that infrastructure. And people see the long lines, going into Mexicali, and then a 2-3 hour wait coming back. That hurts our economy.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of interdependent qualities in this whole mix.
If I could change anything, I wish there was better urban planning. I wish there was a better immigration system, perhaps, that could provide opportunity to people who are coming in to Mexico, who are going to work jobs that no American wants, difficult jobs. I think that if I could change anything about the Imperial Valley, I'd love to create the environment that I had growing up there, which was one of community, of people knowing each other, and being able to share in this transnational, transcultural environment, this bilingual environment. It's a special place.
I would like to see proper industrial growth that could, employ people. Give them good paying jobs with benefits. I think our high unemployment rate is the highest in the state. It's up to 25-30%. And you also have a big agrarian community where they work 6 months and they don't work the other 6 months because the fields are right now producing. So other employment opportunities, we've got a lot of government jobs, and that's good. You see a lot of growth in Imperial. A lot of those people that are buying houses up there, they have a housing boom. A lot of those people are government employees, whether they're teachers or federal law enforcement or local law enforcement. But these are the kinds of opportunities that we have. But there could be others. There could be some type of manufacturing.
So we're pretty limited as it is, right? Everybody knows that Imperial County is extremely underserved. We are considered below poverty community. Jobs are scarce. A lot of homes are one-income homes to no-income homes. They're dependent on SSI or IHSS benefits, especially on the demographic of families that we serve. Us serving the special needs community of Imperial County, but also serving the underserved North End, Calapat, Island, Bombay. So already we're kind of not just behind on the times, but severely under, funded. And families are trying their hardest to keep their families positive and involved, but it's very hard when everything comes with a cost. So what we do is we try to find strong support.
This is a big country. There's lots of issues all over the place, but unless a community like ours continues to maintain a sustained voice and set of clear demands on what we feel is important, that we get treated just the same as any other community in the country, and look for those dollars to make the real needed improvements to protect our health. Unless we do those things, we're going to have the same fate as we've had over the past number of decades.
Everything always comes back to the water in California. The desert always comes back to the Salton Sea. I care a lot about transboundary issues and the people in California and in Mexico. And all that together just made it so that I just felt like I had to at least try to get the word out. I know this project isn't going to solve the problems, but the thing is, I feel like if you have a lot of political will to solve those problems, that the state will solve it. I think you could cover the New River at one point. If the area could raise $5 million, then the rest was going to be covered by the state. But there wasn't a strong enough tax base to really do that, so it didn't get covered. So in Mexicali, it's covered. Calexico, it's not. It's going right by people's homes. And it would be so simple to reduce so much of that pollution, but all of our friends know nothing about it.
Love your neighbor. We could totally use outside support in any way, shape, or form. I mean, just you guys coming out here to talk. I mean, that's a big deal. It doesn't have to be funding or money, just that support saying, hey, you know, I'm interested and I want to know more about you guys. How can I help while you're here? We're talking and you're making awareness. So community that love your neighbor, look out for one another, because at the end of the day, we're all under one big giant sky, right? So let's just take care of one another. That's all I could ask.